Hello and welcome to this Space Claim video tutorial on orienting a scan or a mesh to the world origin. We're going to use a couple different workflows here, some involving using our local origin tool, and also in the Prepare tab in the manufacturing group where we have an Orient mesh tool. And before we go ahead and take a look at how these tools work, let's first take a look and see exactly where our part is. So here we can see our world origin, X, Y, Z, and it doesn't really look like it's aligned to anything in the part. It's at an angle in one direction and an angle in another direction. Now we're going to take a look at doing a boxy prismatic part like this, also something cylindrical, but as we see from many scans, a lot of times we have organic geometry on here, so trying to fit a cylinder through the center of all the data may not turn out to be the best or the right workflow. So we'll explore a couple different methods in orienting these to the best center line. Now, if we have a nice prismatic part here, and to know if we have some nice flat walls, what we can do is while we're in our select tool, if you double click on a facet and it selects a whole bunch of facets next to it, it means that those are close, if not actually on a plane or a cylindrical face. Here we have a curved cylindrical face, and double clicking will choose ones that are either near planar or near tangential. So here we can see we have a nice clean scan on this model. If we go over to our bottle, double clicking does not get me quite as many points in all areas. It got me some over here. We can see some different swatches based on double clicking, but we can see that this is a much more deformed part. So this is a good way to tell what kind of scan or geometry you're working with, doing some double clicking to try to explain tangential facets or planar ones. Now, first let's explore the Prepare tab's Orient Mesh tool, because when we have nice clean geometry, this Orient Mesh tool can work pretty well. It says Orient Mesh to World Origin, mouse over mesh to find best fit temporary plane or cylinder, and click to orient to world origin axis. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And here it says mouse over mesh to fit a planar cylinder, then click to orient axis with the z-axis of the world origin. So first, we're orienting to z, our green axis here. And you can see that when I hover over a planar face, like this one on the bottom, it'll preview a temporary plane through it. When I hover over a cylindrical face like this, it previews a temporary cylinder. Now, if I were to click on this cylindrical face, it would take the axis it finds through that cylinder and orient that to our z-axis. So z happens to be the blue one. I think I said green a second ago, but z is the blue axis. And we can now see the center of the cylinder is now aligned to our z-axis. Oriented, rather, not aligned. The center lines are not aligned, they are oriented, so they are now parallel, but they are not centered. But I'm going to undo one step because I also want to show what happens when you use a planar face. So in this case, we want this planar face on the bottom to be perpendicular or normal to z. We want z to go straight up and down. And here we have a really nice, you can see it's fitting to all of these different points on the bottom. And if I click here and then rotate this around, we can see that z, the blue one here, is now pointing straight down at our face on the bottom. Now, next it's saying to mouse over mesh to fit a planar cylinder, and then click to orient it with Y. So we can see that from the top view, and if I use this little widget in the bottom left, we are looking straight down through Z, and it now wants me to orient something to Y. So again, I could use a cylinder or a face. If I use this cylinder here, should rotate it in this direction until that cylinder is aligned, or oriented rather, to Y. Or if I undo and use a planar face, like say this one in the front here, it'll make the normal direction of that face oriented to Y. So here we can use the Orient Mesh tool to choose either a temporary plane through some faces or a temporary cylinder through some faces, and have that orient to Z and then Y, and there's no need to orient to X. We only really need to do Z and Y, and we could see now that the body is oriented, not centered, but oriented to our world origin. The next thing we can do in using this workflow to get it in the right center is to use the Move tool. If I turn on Move and select the mesh from the tree, you'll see that the Move tool goes to the center of the boundary of this. It's not the center of volume. This thing is actually not watertight, so it really has no volume. What it's doing is it's going to the center of the boundary, the bounding box of this part. And if it's the center of this bounding box we want at the center of our world origin, what I could do is just turn on the Move tool, select the mesh, click up to without clicking an arrow. If I click the up to tool without clicking an arrow, what it'll do is it'll allow me to move in all three directions at once. And I happen to know my world origin is over here, and when I hover over the center, it highlights the whole thing. And that's when you want to click, and it'll move the body, the entire mesh, so it is centered at the world origin. Now, if it happens to be that we want Z to point up or Y to point back, something like that, X to the left, what I could do is I can turn on the Move tool, click the mesh. It's going to be at the center, and I could choose the direction I want to rotate it in. I can click on this green arrow and just type in 180. See that appears right there. And now it goes ahead and flips it around. And if I go back to this home view, we could see that my Y is going back, X to the right, Z is up. That may be the orientation we want. Or again, we could take our Move tool, select the mesh in the tree, and choose another rotational handle, type in 180, 90, whatever we want in order to orient this correctly. So that is how we would go about using the Orient Mesh tool that's found in the Prepare tab in the Manufacturing group. But let me go ahead and undo back a little bit. Just going to hold down Control Z for a minute because we're not always fortunate to have nice planar faces or cylindrical faces to deal with. Also, we may want to center it between two faces which may be drafted. If we just use one face and it's drafted a few degrees, the thing will be skewed a little bit. So we're going to explore a few different methods to put in planes and references. So I'm going to escape out of the Orient Mesh tool, and we're going to go back to our Design tab. And the first thing we might want to do is put a plane in through a set of points. So all I need is 3 points. I can hold down Control and click 3 points. A lot of times we'll do this in, from one corner to another and in the center. And then we'd click the plane tool. But what we can also do is double click. And here, if it finds all these different faces, that's way quicker than holding down Control and clicking some points. So I could just double click and then click the plane tool, and it'll insert in a plane through there. Now, what we may want is a center plane through the points on this left or the right and the left. Now, what I can do is put a plane in through each one of those the same way. Put a plane in through the side over here. Double click here and put a plane in through that side. So now we have a plane in through either side. And if I want a bisecting plane, because we can see that they are angled in a little bit, if I hold down Alt and Shift, this is how we set up a temporary axis. Hold down Alt and Shift and click the first one, and it'll preview this dotted plane around it. Keep holding down Shift and Alt and select the one on the right side. So Shift and Alt, click one, keep holding it and click the other, and we could see a temporary bisecting plane going right through the middle. And I could go ahead and select that, and then click the plane tool to insert in a plane between those. So I have a plane through the bottom, and I also have a plane through the side. Now I'm going to hide these planes for a second because there's one other thing we want to explore and include in this video. The bulk of this model is the printer, and then it also has this little tray or shelf on the side. And while we may want to include that, we may want to center this and not to the main body and not include this little lip on the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some points on the side here, some facets by double clicking. I'm going to insert in a plane, and I can use my Move tool and I can move that plane around. So I can have my plane selected and I can go ahead and move this out a little bit just so it's only slicing that off. And what's nice is the split body tool works with meshes. You turn on the tool, it tells you to click a target object, and that's going to be our mesh. Click anywhere on the mesh. Now it says to click a face, a plane, or an edge to use as a cutter, and tells me the same thing here. Select a cutter, and I could go ahead and click on the edge of my plane, And now I've got two meshes, the large part and the small part. And maybe I'm just trying to cut something off. I could always click here to delete if I don't want to work with it, but I'm going to undo. I do want to have two different mesh bodies. And we'll go back to select. We'll go ahead and select the second mesh in the tree. And I'm just going to go over to the display tab and change the color just so you could see that we have two different mesh bodies here. Now we've gone ahead and let me show these planes again. I don't need this last plane anymore, so we'll go ahead and uncheck that to hide. And in fact, I don't really need these two planes on the side right now at the moment, so I'm going to uncheck those in the tree. All I really need are these two planes right here. If I also cared about vertical top to center, I could put a plane in through there. But typically, since we're orienting to the bottom face, and the move tool always centers to the middle of the boundary, this happens to be in the center vertically. There's no drafted walls to be concerned about, so we don't need to put in a horizontal plane to get that centered. Now, what I want to do is I want to put in a local origin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the large mesh body. And let me turn off my move tool so you can see this a little better. I'm going to click the large mesh body. And in the create group is a origin tool. And when I click that, a local origin is put in that is oriented to the world origin. One thing to note is you cannot move the world origin around. Notice it's not moving. But this local origin is an object. It's found in the tree. And I could actually move that around. I can translate it and rotate it, and it'll move. And so what I'm going to undo before doing that. My goal here in this local origin is to orient it to the part. So right now, it's not oriented to the face on the bottom, or the plane on the bottom, or the face through the center. And what I'm going to do now, just to make this a little less confusing, one, if your display tab, if your world origin is not shown, in your display tab under show is world origin, and you can both hide and show it. So what I need to do is I need to orient the local origin to the part. So with my move tool on, I'm going to select it. And now remember, we have Y going up, Z this way, and X that way. And let's say we want Z to be up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the local origin with my move tool on, and I'm going to click the arrow that's in the Z direction. After I do that, I want to click this button on the side called Orient to Object. And then I'm going to select this plane on the bottom because I want to orient the Z direction perpendicular or normal to this plane on the bottom. And now my local origin is pointed with the Z axis down. Now I may want to rotate this. I may want my Z to be up, so I'll just go ahead and click on this red rotational handle, type in 180 to flip that so Z is now pointing up instead of down. Now next, I want the X direction to be perpendicular or normal to this plane through the center. So we're going to do a similar process. So I'm going to have my move tool on and click my local origin, click the X direction arrow of the move tool, choose Orient to Object, and choose this plane in through the center. And if I click in white space, we can now see that the local origin is centered to the part, Z is pointing normal to this plane, and X is pointing normal to this plane. Now again, I may want this to be 180 degrees around, so I could always select that local origin, select the direction I want to rotate it in, type in 180, and it'll go ahead and flip that to the other side. So if I go to my display tab and show the world origin again, we could see the difference. This is the actual direction of the X, Y, and Z axis of our model, or our design rather. And this is a different one that's oriented to the part. Now, what I want to do is I want to move everything here. I want to move all these planes that I took the time to set up, both meshes and the local origin, so that they are snapped to the world origin. So the way to do this is to select everything in the tree by clicking on the top one, holding down Shift, and clicking on the bottom one. This so ensures that I have everything from the top to the bottom. You then right-click on the local origin, and Snap to Origin is found here. Now, before I do that, remember that the world origin, which is hiding over here, Y is up and down relative to our Z, and it's also at a different angle. But when I select all of these things, and another way you can do it is you can do Control A. Control A is select all. And you right click on the local origin and you say snap to origin. And what this will do is it'll both translate and rotate the part so that our local origin is aligned to the world origin. Now I'm going to click this home view to get back into a home view, because what I want to do is I want to hide the world origin for a second, and you'll see that the local origin is in the same spot. And if I show the world origin and hide the local origin, we could see that they're in the same spot. So it took everything that was selected, both mesh bodies, the planes, and the local origin, and it translated and rotated them until the local origin was snapped to the world origin. And so we could see that our part is now aligned to the world origin using a plane through the bottom, a bisecting plane in the middle of two drafted faces, along with moving both of these meshes at the same time. So those are two different workflows. One, using the Orient to Mesh tool when we have nice clean faces to work with, and also a method inserting in a local origin. Now let's go ahead and take this over to the bottle because there's a couple different things we can do for this. If I double click on a face here, we could try to grab some different sets of faces. You'll see that I may have to double click a number of times to get enough faces. So this double click method can be pretty useful for getting a number of faces. But here it actually found a lot of different ones. And when I click, instead of clicking the plane tool to put in a plane, I can click in the axis tool to insert in an axis. Now let's take a look at this axis. We can see it's skewed a little bit. Let's not forget that this part is not perfect. We can definitely see some deformation on it. And so another method we could use is called paint select. Down at the bottom here, we have this box select method where if I drag across it, it'll select a bunch of points. Now here it's selected only facets on one side. If I want to select facets on both sides, I could use this through option in our selection filter and box select across something. It'll grab all of the facets, and I could try to put it in an axis through there. Now this one looks a little straighter than the first one. If I hide the first one, this does seem to be more through the center, so that could be our starting point. Last but not least, there's a paint select method. If you click on this box at the bottom, you could go from a default box select to a default paint select. And we could try to basically, what we do is we drag over the model to select things. And you could hold Control while you do this to add in additional selections. And then with this paint select, we can insert in an axis. And again, you can see that it's all based on the points that we choose, how deformed they are. So, this is one method to put in this axis. But I'm going to go ahead and delete all three of these to show you another method, especially when we may only have a few good areas to work with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in through a cross section. I'm basically going to slice this model in half. Now, remember, our world origin is at a bit of a skew here, so we can't use that as a reference. So, a number of different things we could use as a reference. We could try to pick 3 points under the bottle head right here and go into our sketch group. And we can see here that, we're in a pretty good cross section. If I use this plan view button at the bottom right, it'll make us normal to the view, and it looks like we're pretty heads on. But if we did want to skew it a little bit, we could always click this button at the bottom called Move Grid. It puts the move handle on the grid, and if you click on a rotational handle, you can drag to adjust the angle. You could also type in an angle if you want. So if we look back here, we can see it's skewed a little bit that way. Maybe we'll go back 1 degree this way. Looks like I went in the wrong direction. You can also type in values if it is rotating a little too much. You might want to do like negative 0.5. Sorry about that. We'll zoom back in. So, we can take whatever cross-section we want. We can take the cross-section, we can translate it up and down. We probably want to take this cross-section from an area that we know we have nice, clean data, like the least deformation possible. It's probably likely that this cone on the top has limited deformation based on the shape. So we'll go into a cross section through the cone here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this 3-point circle, and I'm going to snap, somewhere where it looks clean, where it doesn't look deformed. So I may snap here, and then snap over here, and then, we'll go ahead and snap over here. So we could choose 3 different places to snap to. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me a center point to use. Now, I want to go down to another cross section, so I'm going to turn on this move grid tool at the bottom, and I'm going to choose the vertical move handle, and I'm going to go ahead and move this down. Again, we want to choose a good cross section as a reference, somewhere where we can pick a number of points. Based on the way this warps out, I think this part's probably pretty strong here. We could see here we've got some design in here, which gives this thing some strength. So I could go ahead and snap here and snap over here, and then maybe we'll go ahead and snap one more over there. So we basically have our 2 circles laid out. And I'm going to go back into 3D. Now notice in the tree we've got our mesh and we've got 2 surfaces. Now we want to have a center point, so what we need to do is grab these 2 edges that are there and copy, Control-C, paste, Control-V, and that will put in a set of circles, and I could go ahead and grab the 2 points there and insert in an axis that way. Now remember, the workflow of using Orient Mesh won't work too well on this body, simply because we're not sure how good the cylinders are. Here it looks like it may have found a decent one we could use. So this one's at too much of an angle. This one here, if I go ahead and click, that'll orient to Z. So that may be good enough on the bottle like this to, basically find one of these and orient it that way. At this point, we could just take the move tool, select the mesh, choose the up to command, and choose our world origin that's here. And now it is centered vertically. It's a cylindrical part, so it doesn't matter what orientation is this way. And the Z-axis is now aligned to the center line. This is, of course, with the Orient Mesh tool. If there is a nice clean cylinder, you'll see that it took a while to find a good one in here. See, just kind of moving around, it goes to all these little different ones. There it found a large one. Once you find that large one that you want to use, just go ahead and click it. Might try moving to another side, so there I was able to find it again. So you can see just based on the quality of the scan, sometimes it's hard to find the right, and here we go. This would probably be the one we want to use, and we can go ahead and click to orient that. But I'm going to undo because I want to show the method of when we don't have that. So what we have now is an axis sketched between the center lines of 2 cross sections. We have the mesh. We have a couple surfaces. We may or may not want to keep those. So we'll go ahead and move those as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the mesh and insert in a local origin. So again, this local origin is centered to the mesh, but not oriented to the part. It's oriented to the world origin. So what we need to do is take the move tool, select this local origin, choose the direction we want to be oriented to the axis. That's probably Z. And then use the orient to mesh, orient to object button and choose this axis. And you'll see the move tool now has Z pointing in that direction. And if we want Z to be up, we could always use the move tool, click on the local origin, type in 180, and now Z is up. Once we have this local origin in place, we could select all the different bodies in the tree. I'm just going to do Control-A. It doesn't select hidden ones, so we may need to Control select those. Right-click on the origin and say Snap to Origin. And now we can see, let me hide our local origin. We can now see the world origin is centered to the part and centered to the axis. Now, if we want the world origin, if we want the part to be on the bottom of the part to be at the center of the world origin, what we could do is select whatever we want in the tree, probably like the 2 surfaces and the curve. The axis doesn't matter here. We could do the local origin or not. And what I want to do is I want to drag the move tool to the bottom of the part. Now we could always select a set of points and insert in a plane. For now, I'm just going to drag it down to the bottom. And what I now want to do is I don't want to just say up to the world origin. I just want to move it in one direction, this blue direction. So I'll click on the blue direction, click the up to command that pops up in this window here. If you don't see that, it's also on the left, up to. And then I can go ahead and click my world origin. And now the bottom is centered to it. I zoomed out a little bit just to see the world origin a little better. But now I have my part at bottom at the 000 at the world origin. So this is the workflow in terms of orienting prismatic parts that have nice planar faces or cylindrical faces. Also, when we don't have that luxury and we have to insert in a local origin, as well as something that is a little deformed and we want to find some good data instead of trying to sample all of the data that's in here, because some of this warpage would make the center line skewed a little bit. So please check out some more tutorials. Thanks for watching and good luck.